Here I am. Hey guys. All right. So we're going to, like always, we're going to go ahead and give everybody a little bit of time to get in. Not sure if all the notifications have gone out yet. Facebook being slow tonight. Yeah, it looks like Facebook's being super slow. So guys, if you could do me a favor and you're in here, I see a couple of people in here already. Go ahead and share out. That would be super helpful if you're on the Facebook platform. Looks like everything else went out the way it was supposed to. And plus, that is the best way to support us streamers if you enjoy what we do. And it's absolutely free. So we usually give everybody about 5 minutes to get in here. Let me know if you have if I have any echo issues. Apparently something's going on with StreamYard, so I don't know if I can or cannot fix it, but I would like to be aware of it if there's some sort of audio problem. What else was I going to tell you about? I don't know. I guess it'll come to me later. But we've got a really good one tonight. This is an interesting one for anybody that tuned in to our podcast last night, the You Can't Sit With Us podcast, which you can find that on Spreaker and all your other podcasting platforms. So it is super helpful there too. If you go in and put in a good rating for us, something with the algorithms, it helps a lot if you put in some sort of comment. I mean, you can put in a recipe for all we care, but just if you could go in there and give us a like on your podcasting platform, that would be greatly appreciated. And for the new folks just joining us tonight, my name is Mother Delamort, and this is my horror gallery. We talk about all sorts of haunted history, dark history, things along those lines. And like I said, this is a good one tonight. You know, I do like those unsolved mysteries and things like that, and the obscure ones. I like to bring you stuff that you may or may not have heard of. Yeah, the mainstream stuff is cool, but I think we've all heard it so many times ad nauseum that I really, really like bringing you really interesting stuff that you may not normally have heard of. Let's see, housekeeping. Oh, also, we have just started our submission acceptance for our listener stories for our December episode, which is our Victorian Christmas or Victorian Ghost Story and Christmas episode. So if you've got something really, creepy or unusual that's happened to you, a family member, somebody you know, or a family favorite ghost story, or maybe just even a local piece of, obscure folklore or urban legend in your area, submit those. You can put your name on it, or you can remain completely anonymous. You can contact us at P as in Paul, pbunnydc@gmail.com, or you can go on our website and simply click below the notification as far as the submission, the listeners' stories. It just says contact us. So that's super easy that way too. All right. Well, let's go into the comments. Looks like we've got some comments here, and let me say hi to everybody that's in here so far, and then we will get started on our story. All right. So we have Calvin. Calvin says, hello, Odd Mother. Well, hello, Calvin. We are so glad to have you here tonight. We also have, who else do we have? Mr. Giggles, and he wants to let everybody know that he pooped, or he is pooped. Or you pooped, or did you poop? All right, and then audio is good. Good. I am so glad. It must just be something weird on my end with StreamYard. And then we've got Kisa here. Hello, Kisa. She's saying hello to Calvin. All right, and I think I've got caught up so far. So let's go ahead and begin. So we're going to go ahead and kind of, this is an old one. Of course, we're going to be going back to the 19th century. Oh, and there's the notifications on Facebook. Man, they are slow tonight. All right, so we're going to be going back to the 19th century around the time of Saucy Jack. Very much during the time of Saucy Jack, as well as before and after. But we're going to go ahead and I'm going to give you a little bit of just knowledge about the area. I know that we've gone over a lot of the living conditions before when we did the cemetery, the 7 like fabulous cemeteries that they have over there in London and Great Britain. And so, I know a lot of you guys probably already know kind of what the living conditions were during this time. But let's go ahead and get started. And tonight we're going to be talking about the Thames torso murders. Sometimes they're known as the Thames or the Thames. I'm sorry. I always want to call it the Thames. The Thames torso murders or the Thames mystery. So the East End of London, often referred to within the London area simply as the East End, is the historical core of a wider East London. It's east of the Roman and medieval walls of the city of London and north of the River Thames. Now, the River Thames, known alternatively in parts as the River Isis, is a river that flows through the southern part of England, including London. At 215 miles long, it is the longest river that runs entirely in England and the second longest in the United Kingdom after the River Severn. Now, the Thames passes Hampton Court Place, Surbiton, Kingston upon Thames, Teddington, Tickenham, Richmond. And Richmond is where you see that famous view of the Thames, like from Richmond Hill. It passes through Sion House, Kew, Brentford, Chiswick, Barnes, Hammersmith, Fulham, Putney, Wadsworth, Battersea, and Chelsea. And this is going to be important later on. In central London, the river passes Pimlico and Vauxhall, and then forms one of the principal axes of the city from the Palace of Westminster to the Tower of London. At this point, it historically formed the southern boundary of the medieval city, with Southwark on the opposite bank, then beginning part of Surrey. Beyond central London, the river passes Bermondsey, Wapping, Sodwell, Limehouse, Rotherhithe, Millwall, Deptford, Greenwich, Cubitt Town, Blackwall, New Charlton, and Silvertown. Now, before flowing through the Thames barrier, which the barrier, it protects central London from flooding by the ocean surges. Now, below the barrier, the river passes through Woolwich, Thamesmead, Dagenham, Erith, Herfelt, Dartford, West Thurrock, Northfleet, Tinbury, and Gravesend, before entering the Thames estuary near the south on the sea. So basically where it meets the sea. And of course, for any of our European viewers, I am so sorry if I butchered any of those names. I am fabulous and famous for doing this. Now, during the 19th century, London was a city. So the city of London was, during the 19th century, was really a city of the haves and the have-nots. And most often it was the have-not. There were more have-nots than there were haves. The East End area was notorious during this time for its deep poverty, overcrowding, and associated social problems. Of course, parts of the East End were, without a doubt, lawless ghettos where people lived in appalling conditions. And we've talked about some of those conditions before. But this was also the case with the rest of London. Chelsea, Westminster, Lambeth, Marylebone, and even the city of London proper. All had their enclaves that were as bad as, if not worse than, the East End slums. And for more than a century, the criminal history of the 19th century has been overshadowed by a single name. And can you guess the name? Yes, old Mr. Saucy Jack, Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper, with his exceptionally violent murders, senseless acts, vulnerable victims, and lasting impact, has become inseparable from Victorian London. However, amidst Jack's horrifying spree, there existed another series of equally gruesome killings carried out by an equally enigmatic killer. This relatively untold story shares many similar traits of Jack the Ripper and his reign of terror, yet has forever remained obscured by Jack's overwhelming presence, consuming all attention for well over 100 years and relegating other mysteries to the depths of obscurity. Now, while Jack the Ripper terrorized Whitechapel during the fall of 1888, another unknown killer, or possibly killers, had also been leaving macabre tokens of murder throughout London or the London area. Like Jack, they taunted the police. And like Jack, they were never caught. And like Jack, they were capable of showing an element of precision that led pursuers to believe they may be a butcher or have some medical training. Now, unlike Jack, they never compromised that precision with blitz attacks and disembowelments. The remains they left behind were always neatly cut and neatly packaged. Unlike Jack, their taunts were more subtle, with the cryptic letters to the police and the neighborhood watch. So they didn't send letters. And if murders were carried out by a single person, their or his or her reign of terror may have lasted much, much longer than a single autumn, unlike Jack the Ripper. Now, from 1873 through 1889, a series of 6 torsos were found in the greater London area. Only one has ever been identified. His are among the goriest, most remarkable serial murder cases in history, but he is not exactly a household name. The Thames torso murders, often called the Thames torso murders, often called the Thames mysteries or the Embankment murders, were a sequence of unsolved murders of women occurring in London, England from 1887 to 1889. And I know I gave you some earlier dates and some later dates, but I'm going to explain that a little bit as we go a little further. Let's see, where were we? Okay. None of these cases were ever solved, and only one of the 4 victims was ever identified. In addition, other murders of a similar kind taking place between 1873 and 1902 have also been associated with the same murder series. Speculations have linked the Thames murder series to that of contemporary Whitechapel murderer and Jack the Ripper. However, many argue that the modus operandi of the perpetrator of the Thames torso murders differs greatly from the other unidentified criminal in that the victims of Jack the Ripper suffered progressively more grotesque abdominal and genital area mutilation, whereas the Thames torso murders, he dismembered the bodies of his victims, most often taking the head as well as the hands. Like, most of those were never found. This series has a canonical incident. So there are 4 canonical incidences relating to the Thames murders as well. These cases are known as the Rainham mystery, the Whitehall mystery, the murder of Elizabeth Johnson, and the Penchant Street torso murders. So let's see what's going on in the comments, and then we're going to kind of dive a little bit deeper into these. So yeah. All right, so we have Kisa, and she says, hello, Odd Mother. Well, hello, Kisa. I'm so glad you're here. All right. So we'll go ahead and get back into it then. Awesome, awesome. And guys, please share out. That is the best way to support us, your streamers, if you enjoy what we're doing. So let's get into the first one, which is the Rainham mystery. Now, in May of 1887, the first victim of what is considered the official Thames torso murders was discovered in the Thames River near the village of Rainham by a lighterman by the name of Edward Hughes, who, spying a bundle floating in the water by his barge, reeled it in. Now, of course, thinking it very possible to contain items of value, things along those lines, because you remember they dumped everything into the Thames. Everything. I mean, from sewage to garbage to you name it, it all went into the Thames. But to his horror, it actually contained both the female torso. It had no arms, no legs, and no head, as well as both breasts had been amputated. Now, throughout May and June, numerous parts of the same body showed up in various parts of London, until a complete body, minus the head and upper chest, was reconstructed. An assistant police surgeon by the name of Charles Hebert examined the remains for clues to the person's identity, and due to the lack of a head and the long submersion in water, he was only able to identify that the victim had been a female or was a female. Now, medical men, including police surgeon Dr. Thomas Bond, gave their opinion that a degree of medical knowledge was evident. However, in their view, the body was not dissected for medical purposes. Because the doctors could not state a cause of death, the jury was forced to return a verdict of just simply found dead. Now, in August of 1888, the Ripper murders began in Whitechapel, and while police on the hunt for this newest and soon-to-be infamous serial killer, another torso was discovered on the building site where the new Scotland Yard was being constructed. On September 11th of that same year, heralded the start of a gruesome game of hide and seek, later called the Whitehall Mystery. It began with the discovery of a right arm and shoulder on an embankment on Pimlico. Police at first believed it to be a prank carried out by medical students. And that was kind of a common suspicion whenever they just found like a random body part every now and then. Meaning at first they just weren't that terribly concerned. At that point, Mary Ann Polly Nichols and Annie Chapman had already been murdered on August 31st and September 8th, respectively. So those were, of course, involved with the Ripper murders. The Dear Boss letter would not be received by the Central News Agency until September 27th. 3 days before the night of the double event, and the true Ripper hysteria had not reached a fevered pitch yet. Now, another arm was found on September 28th, lying by the side of the road. Between the 11th of September and the 17th of October, the dismembered remains of a woman were discovered at 3 different sites in the center of the city, including, like I said, the future site of the Scotland Yard Police Headquarters. Now, on October 2nd, a workman on a construction project entered the unfinished vault basement of that construction site of Scotland Yard. And within that vault the torso of a woman. He basically found like this wrapped package. And I find it really interesting, kind of just to go off on a little tangent here. A lot of the information, whether it be podcasts or information looking up on this, they really, really get real specific as to what they find in this packet. So it almost makes me think that it was done purposefully, like just to completely, like if it wasn't gross enough already, just to completely like taunt people and gross people out. So when this particular construction worker found this package, when he went to unwrap it, he realized that there were these small things falling out. And what he then realized is that it was a piece of this torso, like this just the torso itself, but it had been filled. It was just filled with maggots, and had been tied up with a string. So very neat and tidy, and then it's just this torso that is just filled with maggots. So I find that interesting that they really kind of make a big deal out of this, because I mean, yes, you're gonna probably have bugs, body bugs, on a lot of these pieces that they're gonna find, but this must have been just like over the top. Now, shortly after that, they did get what they call a sniffer dog into that vault area, and that dog did wind up finding an additional part to the torso, which would have been the lower part of a left leg. Now, the Daily News on the 9th of October gave details of Dr. Thomas Bond's post-mortem examination of those remains so far. And I quote, "On October 2nd, shortly before 4, I was called to the new police building, and there showed the decomposed trunk of a woman. It was then lying in the basement and partially unwrapped. I visited the vault where it was found and saw that the walls against which it had lain were stained black. I should imagine the parcel must have been in the vault for maybe more than 3 days. At the mortuary, I superintended the placing of the remains in spirits." So basically, he put them in some sort of embalming fluid or spirits to preserve them. "On the following morning, I made an examination assisted by Dr. Hibbert. The 6 cervical vertebrae had been sawn through in removing the head from the trunk. The lower limbs and the pelvis had been removed, and the 4 lumbar vertebrae had been sawn through by a series of long, sweeping cuts. The length of the trunk was 17 inches, and the circumference of the chest was 35.5 inches. The circumference of the waist was 28.5 inches. The trunk was very much decomposed. I examined the skin thoroughly, but did not detect any marks of wounds. In the neighborhood of the cut surfaces, decomposition was especially advanced. The skin was light. Both arms had been removed at the shoulder joints by several incisions. The cuts had apparently been made obliquely." Basically, what he's gonna say is started from above and then went down. So basically, just cut the arm off from up above and then going downward, and then around this part of the arm. The disarticulation had been affected straight through the joints. Over the body were clearly defined marks where the string had been tied. The body appeared to have been wrapped in a very skillful manner. The neck had been divided by several jagged incisions at the bottom of the larynx, which had been sawn through. On opening the chest, we found that the left lung was healthy, but that the right lung was firmly adhered to the chest wall of the diaphragm, showing that at some point the woman had suffered from severe pleurisy. The rib cartilage were not ossified. In connection with the heart, there were indications that convinced me that the woman did not die of suffocation or drowning. The liver was normal, and the stomach contained about an ounce of partially digested food. Portions of the body were missing. Appearance of the collarbones indicated that the woman was of mature development, undoubtedly over 24 or 25 years of age. It appeared that she was fully fleshed and well nourished, with a fair skin and dark hair. The appearance went to prove that deceased had never borne or had any rate had never suckled a child. So she'd never been pregnant, had never been a wet nurse or anything along those lines. The date of death, as far as could be judged, was from 6 weeks to 2 months before the examination. The body had not been in water. I examined an arm that was brought to the mortuary, and I found that it articulately fit the trunk. So he found the missing arm, or they found the missing arm. The hand was long and appeared to be very well shaped. Apparently, it was the hand of a person not used to manual labor. All the cuts on the trunk seemed to have been made after death. There was nothing to indicate the cause of death, though as the inside of the heart was pale and free from clots, it probably arose from hemorrhaging or fainting. From a series of measurements we took, we came to the conclusion that the woman was somewhere around 5 foot 8 inches in height. Now, the torso was matched by police surgeon Thomas Bond to that right arm and shoulder that had previously been discovered on the muddy shore of the River Thames in Plinko on the 11th of September. The Thames torso murders seemed either at that point to abate or else be just simply overlooked during the height of the Ripper rain in blood. As press interest in Jack subsided, then more torso murders turned up. So let's see what's going on in the comments. I'm seeing a lot of people coming in, and it looks like we're getting close to a commercial break as well. And I see Genevieve in the house. Hold on just a second. Let's see what we've got here. Oh, and Kisa said, yeah, they did everything, and they even drank the water from the Thames. Yeah, and there was an instance we're gonna get into a little bit later. People were bathing in it too. I mean, could you just imagine? That would be awful. Yeah, I think a lot of European countries had to kind of go that route. But yes, I would rather just be a complete alcoholic than drink water out of the Thames, most definitely. And we have Genevieve in the house. Hello, Genevieve. So glad you're here. I hope you are doing well and had a great Halloween and spooky season. And then Kisa said it seemed like the victim liked to jigsaw his victims. Yes, he did. He liked them in small pieces. And he liked to spread them around. Like, at first you just think, okay, well, maybe the first or the second, he's just trying to not only hide the identity of the victim, but just make it a little bit harder for him to be caught. Because there are so many areas. I mean, it's smart, I guess, for him to have put these into the Thames, because like we went over at the very beginning, the Thames passes through a lot of areas, and it's not like they had like a database. Like, Scotland Yard was just becoming even a small thing at that point. And so, the likelihood of body parts floating down to a completely different village or community or municipality and those different police and like village elders and things like that, they wouldn't have had a very, like, things moved really slow. They wouldn't have a varied way to say, oh, we found an arm, and oh, we found a leg. So, at first you would think that it was just a really smart way of, like, not getting caught. But after a while, you start to realize, I don't know if it was, maybe it started out that way, but I don't know if it was so much that or just taunting people and freaking people out, because something's going to come about later that's just gross. It's just gross. More so than what's already going on. So. All right. So let's go ahead and let's do a quick commercial break, and then we will be right back.
On behalf of our wonderful residents and the Pickwich Chamber of Commerce, welcome to Pickwich, Ohio. Pickwich offers some truly special natural beauty, great lodging and restaurants, unique cultural activities, and of course, plenty of outdoor recreation. We have so much for you to explore in this little slice of paradise. Like our beautiful Ritual Hill, Parcosa Caverns, or Nug Swamp. We can't wait to get a taste of you. So, come on down and visit us. You won't find a friendlier gosh darn little town that's neither here nor there. Anywhere else. Need more information or help planning your next trip? Visit us on the World Wide Web at pickwichohio.com or contact our Visitors Center at 513-278-7701. Hope to have you soon.
Back. All right, so now let's get back into this. So now on the morning of June 4th of 1889, 3 young boys were playing in the Thames near Battersea Park, under the Albert Bridge. They caught sight of an object lapping against the embankment and were horrified to discover that it was a human arm. They wrapped up the arm and brought it to Scotland Yard, where Dr. Kempster determined that it had only been in the water for somewhere around 24 hours at the very most. It was wrapped in a garment that was embroidered with the name L.E. Fisher. And I quote, the Times, from the Times. The Times of the 5th of June reported that, in the opinion of doctors, the woman had been dead for only about 48 hours. The body had been dissected somewhat roughly by a person who must have had some knowledge of the joints of the human body. She was about 8 months pregnant. The doctors were also this time unable to establish a cause of death. The jury, however, reached the decision of willful murder against some person or persons unknown. Now, how they knew that she was already pregnant when they only found like a human arm, I have no earthly idea. And this could have just been something that the news was doing for like, paper sales and stuff, because they did a lot of that back then. But it would actually wind up being true that she was pregnant. Now, more body parts were found in various embankments throughout the area over the next few days. The Times then reported on the 11th of June that the remains found so far are as follows. Tuesday, left leg and thigh off Battersea. Lower part of the abdomen at Horsey Down. Thursday, the liver was found near 9 Elms. Upper part of the body was found in Battersea Park. Neck and shoulders were found off Battersea. Friday, a right foot and part of a leg at Wadsworth. Left leg and a foot at Limehouse. Saturday, left arm and hand at Bankside. Buttocks and pelvis off Battersea. Right thigh at Chelsea Embankment. Yesterday, right arm and hand at Bankside. So he had just like put these things everywhere. Now, a combination of the found garment, a childhood scar found upon the wrist, and the fact that she had been 8 months pregnant helped identify her as Elizabeth Jackson. She was from County Cork, Ireland, but was currently homeless and working in the sex trade in London in the Soho Square. She was 24 years old when she died. The investigation concluded that medical knowledge had been necessary to perform the dismemberment. At the inquest held by Mr. Braxton Hicks, yes, that Mr. Braxton Hicks, on the 17th of June, it was stated, and I quote, "The division of the parts showed skill and design, not, however, the anatomical skill of a surgeon, but the practical knowledge of a butcher or knacker." And a knacker was basically someone that would go around and like pick up carrion and things like that. And they would often, take them apart if it was like a big cow or something like that. So they were easily toted off and disposed of. There was a great similarity between the conditions as regarding cutting up the remains and that of those found at Rainham and at the new police building on the Thames embankment. So basically what he's saying is the way they were cut, they very well match the way that the other torsos and body parts had been dissected. So he did see a match to that, so that it would be linked to the same killer. The killer once more displayed a tendency to taunt, and get this, as he tossed Elizabeth's right thigh over the wall of the Shelley estate. Yes, that Shelley estate, owned by Percy and Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein. Now, newspapers began to speculate that the Ripper had returned from his several months-long hiatus, going as far as to claim that the killer had sent more letters to the publication, but the police determined this was very unlikely. Now, in July of 1889, that same year, it seemed for a short time that Jack the Ripper was back at his horrific work. Prostitute Alice Mackenzie was found murdered in Castle Alley in the heart of Whitechapel. One of the examining pathologists, Thomas Bond again, believed that the Ripper was responsible, but his colleague, George Bagster Phillips, who had examined many of the bodies of the previous Ripper victims, completely disagreed. Now, on the 10th of September, Police Constable William Pennant found the headless and legless torso of an unidentified woman under a railway arch at Pinchin Street, Whitechapel. It seems probable that the murder was committed elsewhere and that the parts of the dismembered body were dispersed just basically for disposal. And I quote, "A woman's torso was found at 5:15 a.m. on Tuesday, 10th September, 1889, under a railway arch in Pinchin Street, Whitechapel. Extensive bruising around the victim's back, hip, and arm indicated that she had been severely beaten shortly before her death, which had occurred approximately 1 day prior to the discovery of the torso. The victim's abdomen was also extensively mutilated in a manner reminiscent of the Ripper, although her genitals had not been wounded. The dismembered sections of the body were believed to have been transported to the railway arch, hidden under an old chemise or shawl, so to speak. The age of the victim was estimated to be between 30 and 40 years old. Despite a search of the area, no other sections of her body were ever found, and neither the victim nor the culprit were ever identified. Now, Chief Inspector Swanson and Commissioner Monroe observed that the presence of blood within the torso indicated that death was not from hemorrhage or cutting of the throat. The pathologist, however, said that the general bloodlessness of the tissue and the vessels indicated that hemorrhaging was the cause of death. Newspaper speculation that the body belonged to that of a woman by the name of Lyda Hart, who had disappeared, was eventually refuted after she was found recovering in a hospital after a bit of a spree. I don't know what that means, but it sounds like it may have been fun. Another claimed that the victim was a missing girl called Emily Barker. But that was also refuted, as the torso did seem to be from an older and taller woman than from the description that was given of this Emily Barker. Now, Swanson did not consider this a Ripper case, and instead suggested a link to the Thames torso murders in Rainham and Chelsea, as well as to the body parts that were found that encompassed the Whitehall mystery. Monroe agreed with Swanson's assessment, and I quote, "These three murders and the Pension Street case are suggested to be the work of a serial killer nicknamed the Torso Killer, who could either be the same person as Jack the Ripper or a separate killer of uncertain connection." And like I said, later that would be debated as to the modus operandi. Yes, they were somewhat similar, but they were quite different too. This guy seemed to, rather than do it like quick, like blitz attack, he seemed to take his time, as in that one torso that was found in the vault or basement of Scotland Yard had been dead for over, what was it, like 2 months before it was left as a calling card, so to speak. Now, linked between these and the three further murders, which would be the Battersea Mystery of 1873 and 1874, in which 2 women were found dismembered, and the 1884 Pottingtonham Court Road Mystery, had also been postulated. So basically they're saying there were some prior to this outbreak that they are seeing now really, really match what this guy is doing, as well as one that would come like in between the series that is going on now, the series that took place in 1873 and 1874. There was also one in 1884. And so we're going to get to those now. So we're going to kind of go back and talk about some of the ones that happened prior to the ones that were going on during Jack the Ripper. Now, the Battersea Mystery, which again was an earlier killing. The Battersea Mystery is the name given to 2 unsolved murders that took place in London between 1873 and 1874. Now, on the morning of the 5th of September of 1873, a Thames policeman found the left side of a woman's torso in some mud off Battersea Waterworks. The right side of a female torso was found floating in the water off Brunswick Wharf the very next day. The tattered remains of a set of lungs, the flesh and skin of a face, still attached to a scalp, was found. It was obvious the nose and the chin had been cut off from the face, and the head had been scalped. A right thigh and a right shoulder with part of an arm were all discovered in the following weeks. This was how the first known victim of what came to be known as the Thames torso murders. So they're kind of going back now and saying, yes, there was the conical 4 that took place. Sorry, that was my cat Momo. The conical 4 that took place during the 1888 and 1889. But they're now going back and saying that this very well was probably the same guy. Let's see. So did I say the right thigh and the right shoulder with part of an arm were all discovered the following weeks? This was how the first known victim of what came to be known as the Thames torso murder. The body had been taken apart with some degree of surgical skill, and at first it was believed it was some gruesome prank pulled by medical students. So again, they're going to revert back to the fact that it's probably some medical students that were pulling a prank. Now, under the leadership of the acting chief surgeon, Metropolitan Police, Thomas Bond, again, the corpse was reconstructed. The attempts to identify the remains were distributed by the curiosity of the public. So basically, word of mouth, and they did put out some photographs and things like that to any potential witnesses, like asking for witnesses. Now, the Lancet report, which is kind of part of the report that came from Dr. Bond, and it states, contrary to the popular opinion, the body had not been hacked, but had been dexterously cut up. The joints had been opened, and the bones neatly disarticulated. Even the complicated joints at the ankles and the elbows, and it is only at the articulations of the hip joints and the shoulder that the bones were sawn through. So they kind of knew what they were doing. Police surgeon Dr. Kempster, he wound up reassembling the body parts as best he could and made some approximation of the victim's age. He even tried some forensic, like seeing if he could reconstruct what the person's living appearance may have been. And it, from what I understand, it was probably very horrific. And he even tried to reconstruct the manner of death, which he took to be a blow to the head. Now, they did offer a reward of £200, which was a lot of money back then, for information about the woman's murder, but no one ever came forward to claim it. Now, on the 21st of September, the body of this unidentified victim was laid to rest in Battersea Cemetery. Though other body parts were recovered from the river Thames in the intern, her hands and skull were never found. The jury passed a verdict of willful murder against someone or persons unknown. Now, in June of the following year, the partly decomposed remains of a woman's body were found floating in the River Thames near Putney. The corpse lacked a head, it lacked both arms, it lacked one leg, and had been treated with lime before being thrown into the river. The jury returned an open verdict. Again, the victim could not be identified, and again, the killer went unfound and unpunished. However, to the relief of the general public, it seemed that the killer did not strike again. That is, not until more than a decade later, and this would have been the in-between murder. So the Tottenham Court Road mystery was reported by the Times on the 24th of October of 1884, relating to the discovery of body parts of a woman's body: a skull, still with flesh attached to it, a chunk of flesh from a thigh bone. Near Tottenham Court Road in Bedford Square, a woman's arm was found in a parcel. This arm had been tattooed, showing that it might have belonged to a sex worker. A human torso was found in a parcel by a police constable as he passed 33 Fitzroy Square 5 days later. The parcel was believed to have been placed at that location sometime between the hours of 10 and 10:15. Evidence was present in an inquest on the 11th of November held at St. Giles Coroner's Court. This concluded that the body parts came from a woman and that they might have been divided by someone who was skilled, but not for the purpose of anatomy. So again, we're going back to, yes, this person knew their way around a body, but they may not have been as skilled as a doctor. Even though during this time, doctors felt that surgery, it was really weird. Like, they went through this whole thing at first, like when science kind of came to the forefront and kind of like took over from like folklore and legend and old wives' tales and things along those lines. At first, it's like the doctors felt they were too above surgery. Now that would change, but they're still saying they don't believe that it is a surgeon or a doctor, and that kind of also makes you believe, were these doctors really just saying, were they trying to protect, their trade, their upper crust, so to speak? I don't know. Now, the inquest resumed on the 9th of December. More evidence was presented and showed how the body was skillfully dissected and came from a woman, as stated by Dr. Jenkins. This evidence was the right arm, both feet, and the right forearm of a single individual. And again, these earlier instances still remain unsolved. He is thought to have resumed his crimes again in 1902, taking his last victim south of the Thames and leaving her body in a pile of dismembered parts, as he had done with most of his other victims. Now, in this case, rather than spread them out all over the city, he built like this really bizarre and macabre totem pole with them. The mutilated remains of a woman were found in a gateway in the Salamanca Place in Lambeth. She was found in the early hours of Sunday morning at the rear of Dalston Works. Now, a man employed by Dalston Works said that he was going to the works from Broad Street End, and in the gateway, in a corner, he saw a human head and other remains all piled in a heap. The remains seemed to have been put there very carefully, the upper part of the body being placed upon the lower part, and the legs and the feet. He said that when he passed at 10 p.m., he felt very sure that he had not seen anything then. Now, the official description of the remains was given as, and I quote, "The human remains which were found in Salamanca Place, Lambeth, on the morning of the 8th are those of a small woman, aged between 20 and 30, height somewhere around 5 feet, complexion dark, hair straight and very dark, teeth in an excellent state of preservation, prominent cheekbones and upper part of jaw, chin somewhat pointed, given an angular appearance to the face. The nose was probably somewhat turned up. Deceased. From the venereous condition of what little hair was left on the back, neck, and temples, supposed to have been of poorer and neglectful class." So in other words, he's just saying it seemed that this person, because of, I guess, of lack of hair, maybe from vitamin deficiency or something along those lines, is what I'm going to assume. Now, a laborer said that he and another man had passed the gateway the night before at 10 p.m. on Saturday and saw a man and a woman standing in the gateway, but said he would not recognize them again. He said the woman was, however, about 5 feet tall. He said that he was about 12 to 14 yards away, but that it was pitch black. It was pretty dark. He said that the woman had a white hat with a black band, and that the man was about a foot taller than her. The coroner noted that would make him somewhere around 6 feet tall. Now, he said that he could not tell how the man was dressed per se, but to say that he wore a cap and was not dressed like a workman, and appeared dressed up, saying that he had dark clothes on, but again, it was very dark. So he looked to be maybe from a different social class, or just very dressed up for whatever reason. Now, the unusual thing about these remains, other than the fact that they were stacked to look like a totem pole, were that the remains were described as having been mutilated as well as boiled and charred. Now, 20 arrests were made in relation to this murder. Now, ironically, there was also another killer the police had on their hands at this time. And though that could really be a story for another time, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think it has relevance, and I feel that it's appropriate. Now, a gentleman by the name of Sarin Atonowitz Kolowiski, who was born in 1865, better known under his pseudonym George Chapman, was a Victorian-era Polish-Russian serial killer known as the Borough Poisoner. Born in Congress, Poland, Chapman moved to England as an adult, where he committed his crimes. He was convicted and executed after poisoning 3 women. According to a certificate found in his personal effects after his arrest, he was apprenticed at age 14 to a senior surgeon by the name of Mosel Rappaport in Zoin, Poland, to whom he assisted in procedures. Not Poland, but Prague. Yeah, Prague. He helped in procedures such as the application of leeches for bloodletting. He then enrolled in a course in practical surgery at the Warsaw Praga Hospital. Kowalski, or Chapman, continued to serve as a nurse or doctor's assistant in Warsaw until December of 1886. Now, there is some debate because these earlier ones, that he may have traveled several times to like London for whatever reason prior to actually deciding to up and move there. Now, after 1886, Chapman would later leave Poland for the United Kingdom and wind up settling in London. Now, a lot of things that I see both with Jack the Ripper and with this particular case is you always say, you always hear, well, it could have been a doctor, or it could have been a butcher, it could have been a knacker, it could have been a hunter. But the one thing, and I never thought about it myself, that you really don't hear them talk about a whole lot is a barber. Now, a barber, also known as a barber surgeon, was very common in the 18th century. Now, it was starting to die out in the 19th century, but there were, in fact, some barber surgeons still in place in the East End during this time, during this century. Now, in the Middle Ages, the role and function of barbers expanded to cover basic medical and dental procedures. During this time, barbers not only cut beards and hair and styled hair, but they also pulled teeth, performed surgeries, leeching, bloodlettings, and fire cupping. Now, by the 1800s, that medical role of the barber was starting to transition to doctors and surgeons in most cases. And it reminds me of, and I love Johnny Depp, of Sweeney Todd. There's a hole in the world like a great black pit, and the vermin of the world inhabit it, and its morals aren't worth what a pig could spit. It goes by the name of London. At the top of the hole sits a privileged few, making mock of the vermin of the lower zoo, turning beauty into filth and greed. Now, Chapman settled in the East End and became a hairdresser's assistant in either 1887 or early 1888, with records indicating that he worked for a Abraham Radin of 70 West India Dock Road. He stopped working there after about 5 months, where he then opened a barber shop of his own at 126 Capel Street, St. George, in the East End. This was also listed as his residence in an 1889 London directory. Now, again, that is a story for another time. Like that, there is so much to that story. But the really interesting thing is that once Chapman was executed in 1903, the torso killings did in fact come to an end. They stopped. So, you know, who's to say? But that's what I had for you tonight, guys. I hope you liked it. And look at this. We stayed right at an hour almost. 1 minute over. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you learned a little something. I love these kind of mysteries. So yeah, I hope you really like that. I thought it was interesting myself. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. And then Kisa says, seems like a game of find the body parts. Yeah, it really did. And you know, that first one that they found where they said that some of the body parts had been kept in lime, that's usually to keep the stink down. It kind of makes you wonder if maybe that was his like first one. You know what I'm saying? Like the first one. Like there's always that first. I don't know. Something just I notice that when they make points of saying not the same thing like over and over and over again, that there's usually some significance to that. So I'm going to think personally that was probably like, I don't know, victim zero, you know, kind of like subject zero. Other than, well, we all know from, you know, kind of the profile of a serial killer, there were probably animals and things like that they probably, you know, tortured or what have you prior to that. But that one just makes me think that may have been his first one. Yes, very much like Sweeney Todd. Yes, he was a surgeon barber. And, you know, there was another speculation, and I'm going to call it an educated speculation, because there's a lot more on these torso murders. We would have been here for at least another hour if I would have gone into all of it. But that he could have performed abortions. These could have been women that, for whatever reason, died, you know, while he was performing these abortions. As far as I know, they never found the baby of that one victim. So, you know, it does make you wonder. It does make you wonder, was he killing them for some, you know, moral belief that he had on his own? You know, if some, you know, poor street person or poor person was coming in because they couldn't afford to have a child, did he see this as, I don't know, kind of like Sweeney Todd, like as his punishment, like he was relegating punishment for aborting a child? Because this was about the time that, because abortion, especially like by herbal means and things like that, it used to not be illegal, but we're kind of getting more into like the Industrial Revolution and stuff like that, to where they're going to start putting caps on stuff like that. And so, you know, it could very well be that women were having to go to more unscrupulous people, or people in the East End. They wouldn't be able to go to their normal, you know, surgeon or doctor, because the doctor, the barber surgeon, was seen almost like a practitioner, where you had your doctors. The barber surgeon was somewhere in between, like the doctor and the practitioner. So, you know, they knew a lot about a lot. And Kisa says, thank you. That was very good. Well, you are most welcome. And let's see. Calvin says, great show. Well, thank you. I'm glad you liked it. So, yeah, I had a lot of fun with that. I'm not sure what we're going to be doing 2 weeks from now. We've got a lot going on. So, again, for anybody that's just, or that came in later after I had said anything, we have opened up the submissions for listener stories That could be anything from family ghost stories to real life experiences, either that happened to you or a friend or someone you knew or know, or what have you. To local folklore or urban legend in your area. We're gonna go with the whole Victorian ghost story theme, like we did last year, and just have one night of telling ghost stories. We're going to go with the old tradition, the old Victorian tradition of telling ghost stories. And I do believe we're going to have a special guest that night, as well as, hopefully, keep your fingers crossed, we've got 2 other things set up for December that I think that you will enjoy. So we will see. It's a little too early to say yay or nay on that yet, but we're super excited about that. Again, I know I didn't play an ad tonight. I'm in the process of getting a new one generated because sadly spooky season is over. But don't forget to go and support Spook Trail Haunted Maze. They do haunted mazes other than just during spooky season. And I'm not going to say any more than that, but they've got something that will be coming up within the next 6 months. And we'll start advertising for them for that. So yeah, that'll be cool. Let's see, upcoming, what is today? Friday. So this coming up Monday should be Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. If you have not watched that yet, you need to catch it. You need to watch Mr. Moneybags. He is probably the most talented of all of us here. And he likes to do reviews of the old classic horror movies, practical effects, VHS horror movies from the 80s, near and dear 80s and 90s, and all the fun ones. So yeah, that's a lot of fun. And then coming up Wednesday, I do believe that will be another Chit Chat with a Cough. And then following Friday will be Roots Bleed Red. So, and again, if you did not catch our podcast last night, on You Can't Sit With Us, you can find that on any of your podcast platforms. But please do us a favor, give us a good rating, and the algorithm really likes when you put a comment in there if your podcasting platform allows you to do that. I don't care what you put. You put hi, you can put a recipe. I don't care. That really helps us. It really, really helps move us up higher in the ranking. Like everything, there's algorithms these days. So yeah, do that. That would be great. We would greatly appreciate it. We probably actually wouldn't know what to do with ourselves in appreciation. So I hope you enjoyed that tonight. Let me get over here, and I am going to say pleasant nightmares, guys. Bye.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.